What up? What up? What up? It's your man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience, same with the Griots podcast on YouTube, and I have another very special guest blessing the platform. Man, how you doing, my sister?
I'm good. How you doing?
Man, I'm so excited for this show. I'm so excited. I came 3 hours early. That's how excited I am. But I'm ready to do it right now.
I mean, was it 3 hours early or was I
No, 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 never, 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 never.
late?
Let me do an official introduction for those that don't know, man. Let me do it. So today I'm honored to welcome Kendra R. Parker, PhD, Associate Professor of African American Literature and a leading voice in Black speculative fiction and Butler studies. She's the author of She Bites Back, the co-editor of the Bloomsbury Handbook to Octavia E. Butler, and the author of today's show, Understanding Octavia E. Butler. She also serves as the president of the Octavia E. Butler Literary Society. Her work has been recognized with numerous awards, including the 2023 Fellowship for the Huntington Library, a Scholarly Pursuit Grant from Georgia Southern University, the Shine Black Girl Shine Award, amongst others. Her work bridges scholarship, culture, and community, helping us better understand literature, legacy, and Black futures. Please join and welcome us, Dr. Kendra.
Hey. Oh, it's so weird when people introduce you because I was like, where'd you get all that information from?
Your page, your About Me page.
I'm just like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
I had to kind of cut some of it out to make room for this. I had to cut some of it down, but yeah, you got a lot going on, sis.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So today, before we get started with today's topic, a very serious historic thing happened today. For those that don't know, we had the passing of Reverend Jesse Jackson this morning. I heard about that, New York Times and everything. So you being a historian and dealing with Black literature, African stuff like that, what is the impact of his loss today, in your opinion?
I mean, it's huge. I saw somebody on Blue Sky. They were just like, he would be, I think he'd be, I think he, if Fred Hampton had lived, he'd be younger than Jesse Jackson. And it's so weird. One of the things that Jesse
Wow.
Jackson sort of outlived a lot of the people of his contemporaries, and to sort of still having that legacy to live on. So it's a monumental loss. Like all the things that he did. I was just thinking about his DNC speech in 1988. I was 2 at the time, so clearly I know nothing about it. Um, at the time, but he says, your patch isn't big enough. And I think that's such a good speech to look back on. He's talking to different groups of people. He's like, women, if you're trying to be get midwives, have health care, your patch isn't big enough. Talking about his grandmother and the quill. He's like, your patch isn't big enough. He was like, gay people, your patch isn't big enough. But if you all come together, we can make a quilt and you can get health care, this, that, and the third, and all these things. And I think that's something really important to sort of think on and think about, especially as we see some of the movements that are happening in Minneapolis, Chicago. I mean, all over really. But I think it's his words resonate today. Um, but it's just a profound loss. I mean, we know he's been ill for some time, but it doesn't take away the loss.
So this morning in the text message, my mama said to me, he could have been Barack Obama before Barack Obama, but the world wasn't ready. That was a profound sentence. Like I kept on looking at it, like, wow,
Yeah,
he was ahead of his time. Like,
ahead of his time, and just a little too radical. Not for me, but just a little too radical. Reverend Jackson.
Reverend Jackson, man. So with that being said, it is February Black History Month,
Yes.
and so tell us, some people in this generation feel like, man, why we gotta still celebrate Black History Month and all that stuff is in the past and recognizing inventors and heroes. Like, why is it still relevant now, in your opinion?
I mean, the past is never past. The past is prologue, and I mean, you hate to say what goes around comes around. You're thinking about karma, but everything that we're thinking about, talking about now, people have talked about before. And so I hope that we learn from history and well, hopefully learn from history so we don't repeat some of the same mistakes. But also, I think that one way I think Kodwo Eshun is a scholar, and he said the best way to imagine your present sometimes is to look to the future, right? The future is a better guide to the present than the past is. Not negating the past, but if you can think about history and then you can imagine something better in the future, then you can come up with solutions to the present. So I think they're intertwined. Past, present, and future are always in conversation. And so history doesn't have to be 100 years ago. History could be yesterday. History could be today. Um, but it's always going to matter. And I'm, as a lifelong learner, there's so many things I still don't know. And so that's why Black History Month matters. I mean, and we do call it Black Futures Month, right? So this idea of we have a past, we have a present, but we also have a future. And so I think past, present, and future are interdependent and interconnected.
No, I love that conversation because I was talking to a friend recently about, like, I'm here in Louisiana. We said it off the air. I'm here in Louisiana. Today is what they call Fat Tuesday. It's Mardi Gras parades everywhere. But I was telling a friend recently, like, going to the store for the past month, I see all this Valentine's stuff. I see all the Mardi Gras stuff since December. Whenever Christmas ends, pretty much here everything goes toward Mardi Gras, right? Don't really see even a crumb of Black History Month anything anywhere. I don't see any events, any programs, even the schools. They will call, like, at no other point in the year, this point, schools will call my phone, come and do a presentation, Sean, come and do all this. The
Mm.
phone not ringing, like, it's just like it's crazy to imagine what's going on right now.
Yeah, and I mean, post George Floyd, there was all of this marketing everywhere. You saw Juneteenth wrapping paper. You'd be like, all right, y'all, we need. Well, and it's fine. You just Juneteenth wrapping paper, all these things. But in the time since, it's sort of, in some circles for marketing, it's sort of fallen out of fashion for Black History Month. And then, of course, with the recent election and all these mandates across states, it's not fashionable, it's not profitable in some circles, and it's harder to do. People are scared about losing their jobs for inviting something about Black History Month, ooh, because we're scary. So yeah, I mean, I think you have to find the stuff. People are doing smaller things. Um, yeah, yeah, it's hard and it's disappointing for sure.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now, for today's main event, we're talking about your book, Understanding Octavia E. Butler. My first question is, how did you come across Sister Octavia E. Butler? How did you first ever discover Miss Butler?
It's a little embarrassing though. So the first time I came across her, I didn't read her. I was actually an undergraduate student. Um, and I was a senior, and I say this because I think that matters. And I was taking this course called British and American Literature, and there was this book with a Black girl on the cover, and it was all dystopian in the background. And I flipped through, didn't see a picture of the author, didn't really read about it, and then it was written in diary format, and I was like, I want to read this. And so in the class, there was a policy that you could skip one book all semester. All you had to do is just come to class and sit there, and when you got your quiz paper out, you said, this is my skip day. And that was my skip day. And you could leave after that, so I didn't even stay for the conversation. And that book was Parable the Sower by Octavia E. Butler.
Oh
So
my God, that's crazy.
I know. So that was my first encounter, but I didn't actually read it, didn't know who she was. And so I didn't actually officially meet her, if you will, until 2010. I was a grad student at Howard, and I took a grad class called Octavia E. Butler with Gregory Jerome Hampton. He wrote the first book on her, and we read almost all her work. We didn't read the parable books. We did not read those in that class, but we read everything else, and I fell in love with her work, and I've been going ever since.
Yes, ma'am. So this book is a part of the Understanding Contemporary American Literature series, a large conversation about American writing. So what does it mean to you to be a part of this legacy in this pantheon when it comes to this book?
Man, I it's not funny, but it's funny. When I got the email from Linda Wagner Martin, she's the series editor, asking me if I would write this book, I deleted the email. Um,
Huh? What?
I
What you mean?
right, yeah, I deleted the email. Now that's so I laugh, like it's not funny. So in November 2020, Greg Hampton passed away, my mentor. And so we just finalized the Bloomsbury handbook. And so it was the Monday before Thanksgiving. We were going to announce it to all the contributors, show them the cover, and he passed away the day after Thanksgiving in 2019. And so I was grief, right? That's the short answer. So our book released March 2020, sad because you ain't there to see it. And then, everything happened after March 2020. So I got the email from Linda in, I think, September 2020. And I was just like, I'm not doing this. I deleted it because I was like, I just didn't feel like I was the one who should be writing it. Not because I didn't think I could do it, but operating through grief. And I was just like, there's too much stuff going on. Don't nobody want a book on Butler. And I mean, and I know that's wrong. Like people, I wanted the book on Butler. And so a couple weeks later, I ended up talking to somebody, a Butler scholar from way back. And she was like, girl, why ain't you doing this book? Then I said, you right. You right. And so I did. So it really does
Like,
mean,
by the way, I'm sorry what I.
and she was like, ma'am. And so, and it makes sense, right? So in 2020, Parable the Sower hit the New York Times bestseller list. And then, Butler, a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't know anything about her. How come nobody talks about her? And it's like, hold up. Lots of people talk about her. It's just not mainstream people talking about her, but she's got a huge, I don't want to say a cult following, but she's got a major following. So she's a well-known writer in African American literary circles, in feminist circles, science fiction circles. And so it was time, right? It was long overdue, but also perfectly timed. And so I mean, this book joins like Understanding James Baldwin, Understanding Randall Keenan, Toni Morrison, I think Colson Whitehead. I think there are a bunch of books, Alice Walker. And so it really
Yeah.
was perfectly timed.
Yes. 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 So, a lot of writers watch this podcast and stuff like that. Writers, editors, illustrators. So, getting the opportunity like this, how does a person go about getting the opportunity like this? Is the question.
Yeah, so this was unexpected, and I do think that visibility matters. And I don't mean visibility like I don't have a billion followers, not at all. But I do have a website, and so my website's got my picture and the work that I've done. And so I think that visibility, people, when they Google Octavia Butler and they're looking for something, people's names pop up. And so it was literally through the contact me button. I go to conferences. I don't go to writing conferences in the way like AWP. I don't go to those conferences, but I do go to other conferences like the College Language Association or the South Atlantic Modern Language Association, the American Literature Association, and they have editors there. So sometimes editors will see if you're presenting on the program, they'll see your paper and they'll say, hey, I saw your paper on the program. I want to talk to you about a book. That happened for my first book. And then I had good mentorship with Greg Hampton, who is now deceased, with Dana Williams, who is at Howard University. Really good mentorship. They'd be like, hey, somebody asked me to write this. I'm gonna send it to you and they should be contacting you. And so it's a combination of, I think, visibility, making yourself visible. And I know being chronically online is something people are very concerned about, but I think a website is very helpful, a landing page so people can find you, see your face, know your work. I think going to conferences, whatever that looks like in your field, conferences, writers' workshops, and then mentoring and networking. And the mentoring piece, I mean, I remember telling Dr. Dana Williams at Howard, I was a grad student. I sat in her office one day. I said, you're going to be my mentor. And she was like, okay. And I was just like, because I watched how she operated. I watched how she moved. And I was like, whatever that is, I want to learn from that. And then also Greg Hampton. And so I think it's a combination of those things. And then I think you do have to have a desire to do it, and writing, even when it's inconvenient, when it doesn't feel good. Consistency, and I'm not saying write every day, but I am saying being consistent in something like that.
No, that's a wonderful answer, man. I love you going to be aggressive about mentorship because in my writing, I speak about mentorship a lot, and it does sometimes take going out there and getting the bull by the horns, man. Like I need this, and
Mhm.
most mentors or teachers they like that. They want to see you actually want it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm gonna be like, I need some help. I mean, I will say I don't always like asking for help, but I will be like, look, I need a teacher.
Yeah,
You're it.
yeah. So with a giant like Octavia Butler, man, what was the research process like for this book? And how challenging was it to find material you needed to write this book? How difficult was that process?
It was really interesting because I think it was complicated by grief. So after I got the book contract, I didn't write for a year. Now I didn't work on the book for a year. Now when I say that, I teach, and so I'm always teaching her work. And so if I wasn't actively writing, I'm teaching and I'm taking notes. And then when I got serious about writing, I did a number of things. I was like, look, I'm going to test my ideas out on my students because you can't go nowhere. You pay for the class. And so, test the ideas out and what about this? And they'd be like, oh, and making them uncomfortable. Um, and that was a lot of fun, but I knew that this book wouldn't be what it was Without, of course, acknowledging the other biographies that came before it, which, so you've got the 2016 one by Jerry Canavan, the 2021 by Linnell George, the 2022 poetic version by Ibi Zoboi, and of course all the other scholarship. But I needed to go to her archives, and they are housed in the Huntington Library in San Marino, California. But that also requires money, and so I applied for about $14,000 in grant writing, and I got 8,500. So I was able to spend a month in person in her archives, and the rest of the time I was doing it digitally. And it was such a good experience because she's got 300 plus boxes in her archive. It's massive. And so
Wow.
yeah, it's so much. And to see, like, I was like, okay, what am I doing? Like, I knew I didn't want to talk, I wasn't talking about her unpublished manuscripts or like the different versions of her draft. That wasn't the purpose of this book. I needed to focus on her published work. So I knew there was some stuff I didn't need to look at or I didn't need to focus on in those moments. And Jerry Canavan does a really good job of that stuff in his book. So I was looking first, I was thinking about Butler as a romance writer. And so I wanted to see her thoughts about romance as a way to help me sort of think through that. And that's one of the things I found. I knew she was lonely, but she was deeply lonely, isolated, wanted romantic companionship, never had it. And then she also wrote what she would call dirty stories. And so you could see some of her drafts of her stories from when she was like 11, 12. And I was like, ooh, child. I said, oh. I said, okay, girl. I said, yes. But, just sort of exploring, trying to find her voice as a writer, looking at, she studied romance writers. So like that was fun to see. And so to look at some of her work, I was like, oh, there are threads of romance in it. And she also didn't like to be sort of categorized as, she was science fiction, but she was sometimes bothered by labels because she was like, if you put my book in science fiction, certain groups of people aren't going to read it. And so she was sometimes bothered by labels. But so that's one of the major things that I had to do is get the funding to get out there and then decide what it is I wanted to look at. And sometimes you're reading through, like I loved going through her journals, her walk thoughts where she would just walk and take notes, her commonplace notebooks. But then sometimes, I was curious about some of her drafts, and you could see her dedication. What Susanna Morris in her 2025 biography of Butler, Positive Obsession: The Life and Times of Octavia E. Butler, it's her positive obsession. And she, you're reading a draft of something and you're like, okay, and then you go a few pages later and you're like, I'm reading the same thing over. And she would just change a word. But instead of just crossing it out on the previous page, she would rewrite it entirely. And I was like, oh, 'cause I was like, this is the same thing. But if you don't read carefully, you're going to miss the one word that she changed or the one sentence or circling back. And you'd be like, wow, she had character profiles. She was writing some of her patternist series when she was a young girl that eventually, she started publishing that 50 years ago this year, actually 1976. So to see her process was massive. And then taking all of that and trying to distill it out into, okay, how do I want to tell her story? And then how do I want to tell her story affordably? Because 10 years ago when Jerry Canavan's book came out, people loved Butler, but I think the estate, things were different. But you now have to pay to use her words from the Butler estate. And I have no problem with that. Butler, she was very, she was bothered that she wasn't getting paid what she was worth. And she would often, she grew up not having a lot of money. She was always, always, always concerned about money. When she won the MacArthur Genius Grant in 1995, it was the first time that she felt financially secure, but she was still dogged by, oh my God, like, I don't have enough money. And so, the Butler estate, they ask for money when you quote her work. And so I had to be very mindful because I want to be able to publish the book but I also, I need to be able to publish the book in a way that I can also afford. And then post-production, you have the book's index, and that also costs money. And so I did petition for funding from the university to get somebody to do the book's index and pay for that. And so there are a lot of different factors, from research to funding to making sure like what you're willing to pay out of pocket to make sure that the book gets published. And then conversing back and forth with the estate, making sure like, hey, is it okay? It's coming out soon. So stuff like that. It's a whole mess.
But this is why I do this podcast, because this is meant to be an educational show. Why is this entertaining? But again, a lot of writers, we talking in private about trying to get grants, trying to get funding. This is around the pandemic, right? 2020. So like, did the pandemic impact you as far as lockdown, travel, the government? Like, were you impacted by the pandemic?
Not at that time, because at the time I didn't have the book contract. I didn't get until I think I returned it in February 2021. And so I something did happen because I planned to go to the archives in 2021, and I don't remember what happened, but I couldn't go. I mean, travel was restricted, grants were restricted, but I didn't officially, I hadn't applied for grants at the time. And once I realized you could access her stuff virtually, that's the avenue I took. It was just slower because you could only do it 3 days a month, 1 hour a day. So I got 3 hours a month to go through her work. And it's just you're on like a Zoom platform and somebody's looking at a document camera and you're reading and you say flip the page.
Man,
And then
that's crazy.
hmm
That's crazy. See, I've never heard any of this before. This is amazing information. Wow.
listen, and it's open to the
Mhm.
public. You could go to the Huntington. You just need a library card, a researcher card. You have to apply
Yeah,
for it. It's free, and then you can,
yeah,
you have to observe the rules and go in and look. I mean, and you're touching her stuff. You're touching
yeah.
her journals. You're touching her mom's journals. You're touching the receipts that she kept. I mean, it's literally just her handwriting. And I think that was the hard part, like going in every day, being like, okay, I'm looking at her work.
Man,
All right, get over to being starstruck, looking at her work, and read and take the notes so you can do what you need to do.
yeah, yeah. So this is always the hardest part. After the research question, everything can't make it into the book, obviously. So is there something that you feel in hindsight, like I wish I could have put this in the book, but I couldn't?
I mean, like I would love to have had pictures of some of her affirmations just because, it's nice, or I would have liked to have been able to quote more from her archives, but so I don't think that there's anything that I think the book is complete, but I think there are enhancements that I would have liked to make. So just like there's one quote, I think it's in chapter 1, where she writes a journal entry, and I don't remember the date, but she comes back 5 years later, to like 5 years and a week later, and re on that same page and rewrites in a different color. I would have loved to put that in the book, because she was like, every day in every way I write better, faster, and more. And she came back 5 years later and she was like, hey, I'm back and I did what I said I was going to do 5 years ago. So that would have been like, so I write about it.
I love that. I love
Seeing it on the page, that's something different, to be like,
that.
she ain't lying. She didn't make this up. No, I didn't make it up. It's right here. Like, so to see it, because I mean, I remember stuff. I've got a good memory, but to go back to find a journal from 5 years ago to then write with the new date, that stuff like that.
Yes, and I'm a very process-driven person, so I love when a person shows their notes and they show their index cards and the
Yes.
character profile. I love hearing stuff like that.
Absolutely. You asked about the process. Anything I wouldn't have left out. I mean, I had a word limit. The contract said 60,000, and they said, we want you to get to 60,000. And they said, you can get to 65 and we'll still take it. They were like, if you're over 70,000, we're probably going to ask you to cut it down. So my first draft was 80,000 words.
Ooh. So what do you do with the other 20? Do you just trash it? Do you save it for something else? Do you have a
I
save file?
Yeah, I never, like, I delete it, but I don't delete it it's put into
Changes?
deletions.
Yeah.
It's put into deletions. And so some stuff was, it's a first draft, so some stuff was repetitive. I was able to negotiate it. The final book was 73,000 words. And I was like, look, 3,000 of those are footnotes and bibliography. So technically I met the 70,000 threshold, because I was like, I can't do nothing else.
I
Uh,
love it. I
yeah.
love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. You described this book as a eulogy for Octavia Butler, and having written a eulogy myself, I know how heavy the responsibility could be. Um, how do you feel looking back on it now? How you feel about your work looking back on it?
It's always I've read parts of it since it's been published, but it's one of those, once it's out, I'll be like, I don't want to look at it. I don't want to see anything about it. But so I felt good when I submitted it, but you're kind of nervous. And then I got one person, what Jerry Rafiki Jenkins, he wrote a blurb for the book. So when you write the book, you know this. When you write the book, the editor will ask you, "Hey, who do you want to blurb it?" And so you send out a list of names, and they don't tell you who's going to do it. And he reached out to me, emailed me. He was like, "Hey, I read your book. I loved it." I was like, "Oh my God, okay, good, 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 good." And then I think they showed me the cover of the book and they said, "Hey, we'll show you part of the quotes on the back." And they still didn't tell me who had written what on the back of the book, the blurs, but it looked good. And so when I got the physical book and I saw that Jerry Canavan and then that Jerry Rafiki Jenkins had written those things, I was like, okay, okay. Because, I was like, all right, that's it. That's all I need. It's good. I said, yeah. And so it was, it was a hard book. It was a hard book to write just because of the grief, right? And so I never met Butler. Greg Hampton loved her work. The words on her gravesite are the words from his favorite novel, Parable of the Sower, that were used at his funeral. A friend of mine's son passed away in 2021. So that was also like another layer, because you're just like, you're writing a book, but your friend's going through all of this. It was just a lot. The world. Um, yeah, but
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So, reading this book, it's a lot of contradictions in Butler's life that's interesting, right? So she wanted to write more than anything in her life. She wanted to write. But
mhm.
she still faced moments of like fear, hesitation, and writer's block. So
Mhm.
like, what does that teach us about creativity and discipline? What can we learn from that?
We can learn a number of things. First of all, she was so hard on herself, and it was low key kind of frustrating to be reading, and she was like, "I'm stupid, I'm this, I'm worthless, I'm lazy." And I'm like, first of all, stop talking to my friend like that. And Susanna Morris, actually, when she did her book launch, she was like, "Yeah, but we kind of talk to ourselves that way." So on the one hand, it was frustrating because I was like, "You are amazing," but it's also, a, you're human, and talk nice to you. And it was also very, very sad because she was like, "Oh, I was finna cuss." She said, "I know the stuff."
Hey, you can. You can. It's not show. You can do what you want to do. Yeah.
And I don't do it a whole lot. I was like, "Ooh," but she was like, I know who I am." And yet and still. And so for her, it was there's that part. She would also write contracts to herself. She's like, "Today I'm going to write 8 hours," and she'd sign it. And then she'd also break the contract. And so even when she wasn't actively writing, she was always doing something, right? She was reading, she was thinking, she was watching TV, she was taking notes. Even if she didn't think that she was writing anything worthwhile or good, she was always writing. And so I think that's also really, really important. It's that sometimes I know, sometimes as writers, we're like, "Oh, I'm brainstorming, I'm just thinking." And you do have to put pen to page. You do eventually have to do that. But there are other things that the writing process for me isn't just the physical writing. It's the conversing about it. It's letting people read my writing and then taking that feedback to heart. I may not look at it right then, but to take it to heart. Um, but I think it's important to know that nobody's perfect, that no one is. I mean, maybe actually, I can't say no one. I am not perfect. I am not the writer I can just sit and write and boom, it's done in the first draft. I've got moments of writer's block. But I'm often actively trying to do something, thinking about the work, grappling with the work, and then being really willing, like, "Hey, I need you to read my work and give me some feedback." Really having that feedback and then taking that feedback to heart, not taking it personally, which sometimes you can do. You just step away from it for a couple of weeks and come back to it, but really see it as a growth opportunity. And so I think there are a number of things we can learn from Butler in that moment. Like, she's, like you said, full of contradictions, but she never gave up. And I think that's probably, if there's one lesson people take from that, it's to never give up.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Many folks don't realize that she also loved poetry, man. She valued poetry deeply, and especially during her writer's block was one of the ways that she would to move through it. So, what did poetry mean to her, and why do you think she chose that to release?
So she's so funny. She said that when she was experiencing writer's block, she would call it literary menopause. And so she said that poetry was the method that helped her get out of it, because she was like, poetry it just simplifies everything. And so that's what I'm gonna do. And so she would write poetry or little verses, right? And sometimes it was just so be it, so be it, see to it. Every day in every way, I'm writing better, faster, and more. They were affirmations to herself, and she took those verses, which not just those verses, but she ended up. She was writing Parable of the Sower, still experiencing a lot of writer's block, but there are verses or poetry throughout Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And then when you go to her archives, there's actually a book called Earthseed, the Book of the Living, but the author is Octavia E. Butler. In the novel, it's Lauren Oya Olamina. So she was writing this poetry for herself. But yeah, it was poetry for her was a way to simplify things that were stuck in her head. And what's wild is that I don't think the poetry is simple at all. I was like, girl, it's complex. As a matter of fact, one of the ones I like that I actually have pulled up is from Parable of Talents, where she says, and I love it because she's speaking in the future, but it's, we have lived before, we will live again. We will be silk, stone, mind, star. We will be scattered, gathered, molded, probed. We will live and we will serve life. We will shape God and God will shape us again, always again, forevermore. And I'm just like, girl. So
Come
I,
on, man. Come on.
yeah, look, come on.
Come
Uh,
on. Yeah.
so I don't know. I like that poem. It's from a funeral service in Parable of Talents, but I just like how it speaks to the cycle of life, birth, death, rebirth, and all of those things. And for her poetry, I mean, all of her writing, but it was a way to be a space maker. So a space maker, like she was a pioneer in Black science fiction, but also when she didn't have a way to write because she was, writer's block, poetry gave her a space, a way to be a space maker for herself so she could get that creative outlet, go and get those creative juices flowing and continue to write.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. She also questioned religion, but she never abandoned spiritual language. So, what was her relationship like with the Bible, and how did that influence her writing about power, destiny, and humanity?
Yes. So she grew up, in a Baptist household, couldn't, can't drink Kool-Aid, lemonade, tea, can't dance, very strict Baptist upbringing. And her mom, of course, read to her. And so she didn't abandon the teachings, but she was not Christian, right? She was just like us. She was very skeptical of this big of how people used Christianity in particular as a weapon. But what she did take from the Bible were the stories, and she was like, my mama probably is not what she intended, but she loved the stories of incest, murder, betrayal in the Old Testament. And she sort of used those in her work. So you got a story called the Book of Martha, where there's a protagonist who God visits the protagonist and is like, hey, you have the task of changing one thing about humanity, and it'll change the course of the world. What is it going to be? And through the story, God transforms from a white man to looking like the main character. Uh, I mean, her book Wild Seed, all of her books have for me sort of a religious element, like this undercurrent. So it was a major influence in her work, even if she didn't particularly care for it. She was deeply concerned about Christian fundamentalism, the rise of fascism, how it would impact everybody who was not a straight white man. And that really does come across in her fiction. She was deeply, deeply, deeply concerned about how people would use religion, Christianity in particular, as a weapon. And we certainly see that throughout her work, but in Parable of the Sower and Parable of Talents in particular, um, most people most people who've read it know it's terrifying. But there's the rise of Christian America is a sect that rises up and sort of brings back chattel slavery, and the presidential candidate who is sort of emerges out of that, his presidential slogan is "Let's make America great again." And so, of course, Butler got that from Reagan, but still, she was, she was very concerned. All of these things. So yeah, she didn't she didn't abandon what the Christian teachings what they meant to her insofar as influencing her to write in the way that she did, not because she was a believer, but because she was like, listen, these are some good stories, compellingly told, and that's what I want to do.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So, her female characters in her work, they didn't rule through force, but they led through wisdom and endurance. What do you think she was teaching us about Black women power?
Oh man. First of all, that Black women are multifaceted, that Black women can and are leaders, and I mean, mostly, not mostly, but also that Black women are probably more effective leaders. Um, that Black women are more effective leaders, but because they can empathize with different groups of people outside of themselves. They can see beyond themselves. And we see this across, her women, whether they were small in stature like Anyanwu from Wild Seed, or sort of tall and androgynous like Dana from Kindred, or Lauren Olamina from the Parable series. This idea that, and that leadership looks different, right? Leadership isn't always about, ruling with an iron fist. It can be communal, cooperative. Um, and also sometimes maybe you have to pop somebody. I mean, when they get up in your face, that's what Lilith does. Like she's not just going to lash out at somebody, but she was one of the characters was very adamant about protecting people from rape, and so she was like, if as a leader I have to punch you in the throat because you're trying to rape somebody, that's what I'm gonna do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He's like,
So,
you ain't no problem with that.
no, no. So she doesn't just show Black women surviving, she shows them shaping what comes next. In what
Yes.
ways does she center them as the architects of the future?
Oh, in her novels, man, survival is dependent on whether Black women are willing to do what's necessary. And so what's interesting is that her Black female characters are often put in, it's a do or die situation. Are you going? It's either survive or die. Are you going to do what's necessary to survive? And it's a really complicated question because you've got a character like Dana from Kindred, who her survival means the disenfranchisement and degradation of another Black woman. Lilith's survival in Dawn means that she has to take on bodily enhancements to become less human, and then raise up a group of people and then convince them to do the same thing, or they'll die. Um, Lauren Olamina, she's a teenager when she starts her journey, but she was like, I've got to get out of this house. And she was like, I'm willing to dress like a man and I'm willing to kill people to make sure that I stay safe, not just kill people willy-nilly, but in terms of self-defense. And so she doesn't put her Black women characters in easy situations. I mean, they have to navigate some real crucial questions, and you sort of feel for them because you're like, girl, I don't want to do none of that. But she, and it's one of the reasons that her characters are often female, because she was like, she wanted to make Dana and Kindred a Black man. She was like, he wouldn't have survived going back. He would have been killed. So she would toy with different gender. And she was like, I can't do it. But putting Black women at the center, showing that they will do what it's necessary to survive, trying to mitigate the harm, but knowing that they probably can't alleviate all the harm that they are eventually going to have to cause. So it's complicated and messy, which is it's one of the reasons I like her work, because I don't think there are any easy answers.
No, not at all. Not at all. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go backwards. So, for those that are new to Afrofuturism, how would you define the genre of Afrofuturism?
Ooh, well, it's described in various ways. I used to joke with my students. I was like, "You'll know it when you see it." They'd be like, "Okay," but it's an aesthetic genre, right? So science fiction written by Black people for Black people, but it's also a critical lens. So I'm thinking about Alondra Nelson. So Mark Derrick sort of coined the term Afrofuturism. Don't ask me the year because it's escaping me. But Alondra Nelson, basically, it's a way that argues that Afrofuturism is a way that highlights race, technology, and science. So those connections. But it's also a cultural phenomenon, right? So the idea of the relationship between Black people, Black Americans, Western technology, these themes of displacement, abduction, all of those things. And so Sun Ra's Space is the Place is one example of a cultural phenomenon. And then an aesthetic production, so where you blend myth and history. So like the best example, well, maybe not the best, but the best example that I probably would have said before Sinners came out would be Ryan Coogler's Black Panther. But I think even I'm assuming you've seen Sinners.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So
I
that
have a serious question for later on in the interview. I have a serious question.
okay, okay. Well, I would say that the aesthetic production of that whole dance thing is where you're blending history and myth to imagine new cultures. And so Afrofuturism is a way to imagine Black past, presents, and futures. Right? That's it. But it is it's a genre. It's a critical lens. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's an aesthetic production. It's all of those things. So it's not just one thing. But basically, it really is imagining Black futures beyond oppression.
So with everything going on right now in our current political climate and stuff like that, what do
Mhm.
you think that readers could gain from engaging with more Afrofuturistic reading and TV shows?
Anti possibilities for the future. It's I think one of the things that is very hard about what we are seeing play out on the screen right now, um, is that it's so heavy and it's so demoralizing, and it's easy for you to be like, it's too much, there's nothing I can do, and then you become stagnant and you can't imagine anything beyond what you see on the TV screen, what you see on social media. And if you can't imagine anything there, you're stuck. And so what Afrofuturism allows us to do is to imagine a future, whether that future is next week, whether it's 2 years from now, whether it's 20 years from now. And if you can imagine that future, then you can think about, well, how do we get to that future and make changes today? And so that's what I think it does. It offers us possibilities. It offers us possibilities. And I think that's really, really important, especially in these times where everything feels so heavy. And it's easy to default to staying stuck or doing nothing.
You had mentioned in your book a certain interview that Butler had, and the person was asking her pretty much like, why you wasting your talent on writing about the future with whatever was going on politically at that time? But again, her things feel more relevant right now than ever. They call it prophetic, right? So, what is the important to understand in art and resistance and prophecy?
Mhm. You know, she would resist the label prophet, and when I teach it, you know, I talk when I teach her work, people, is she a prophet? I'll be like, well, if you look at the term prophet, it's someone who predicts. So in that regard, sure. But when we think about prophet, one of the things that comes with it is it removes the work that she did. She was a historian, right? She studied history. And so it's not prophecy that she's doing. She's just like, look, I'm just looking at trends. I'm looking at the past. I'm looking at where we are now. And if we keep going, this is where we're going. And so it was a cautionary tale, right? She was calling out into the wilderness, sounding the alarm, like, hey, 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 hey. Um, so she would be reluctant to call herself a prophet. She wouldn't want it. She was like, I hope this isn't prophecy. She was like, I don't want this to come true. But absolutely, I think that's the thing about science fiction, speculative fiction, is that, you know, it's asking just what if only, if this goes on. It's a what if question. It's imagining a future and hoping that those of us reading will be like, all right, well, what can we do to not get there? And again, apparently we didn't do enough. Some of us didn't do enough of the work.
Right. Let me ask you about the concept of neo slave narratives. I never heard that before.
Ah, yes.
So, neo slave narratives. We visit the history of enslavement through contemporary storytelling. How
Yes.
did Butler use this form to explore memory, trauma, and survival in her fiction?
Ooh, she did it a lot. So her best, so the works that I argue are neo slave narratives are Kindred, Parable of the Sower, and I mean not the full on neo slave narrative in Wild Seed, but certainly looking at elements of those. And so the slave narrative was a 19th century genre where, like Frederick Douglass's narrative, Harriet Jacobs's narrative, had a particular structure. And so in the neo slave narrative, she, for me, takes that same structure, particularly in Kindred, and represents it to us. And whew, in Kindred, um, man, the main character is living in 1976, and she travels back to, in 1976 California, she travels back to antebellum Maryland 7 times at different points in history. And so she has to learn how, with her contemporary mindset, to live as an enslaved Black person. And in doing so, she's trying to figure out how she can survive. But in order to survive, she has to ensure the birth of her great great grandmother, which means one of her ancestors has to be raped. And so the memory, on the one hand, she's sort of a doppelganger for the character who has to be raped. They could almost look like sisters. So there's that sort of duality in past and present, or in, past for her, or her present past, and she's living there. But then also at the end there, I won't give it away for anybody who's never read it. There is a scar, let's just say a scar, that Dana is left with, and it's her link to the past. Um, Butler doesn't pull any punches in Kindred in particular. She actually said the novel was, she toned it down. That is just the shadow of what slavery was, and it's a lot. So there's one scene where there is an enslaved black man who is being beaten, and the sensory description of it is so you can taste the sweat, you can smell the sweat, you can hear the sound, and it's horrific. And what's so great about Butler's fiction? You're asking about, the future. There's a picture. There's this book here. It's Kindred. It's the graphic novel adaptation by John Jennings and Damian Duffy. And so they take Kindred and turn it into a graphic novel, comic book format. And so imagine reading that stuff and now seeing it on the page. They do a fantastic job of all the stuff that comes into play. There. So she takes she participates in the African American literary tradition in by talking about these by adopting the trends of the neo slave narrative to really help us think. And I think what's really important about Kindred in particular is that she wrote that because a friend of hers in college was like, "Oh, if I'd kill off all my slave ancestors because if I was a slave, I'd have killed everybody, all the white people." And she was like, you don't really have a good understanding of slavery if you really think, like, if just being very dismissive and hard on the enslaved black people, like that generation, because they were so servile and docile, really not sort of understanding. So she wanted to write a book to address people who had that way of life, and then showing them how easy it was to adopt the mindset of being enslaved. And that's what she does with her character Dana. She was like, I didn't realize how easy it was to just fall into line. So that book was, she really wanted to make a point to people, black and white, about what slavery really, really was. And like she said, she toned it down.
So for anybody out there that has never read Butler's work before, they're seeing this interview, it sounds interesting. What would you suggest a beginner start out of her whole catalog? What's a good jumping point?
So this is hard because it depends on what you like. So if you've never read anything science fiction, you're like, I don't like science fiction, none of that, then I would say Kindred is the place to start. Only because um, she didn't call it science fiction. She called it grim fantasy, right? And it's 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 the one that, without fail, any of my students, they're like, I don't like reading, I don't like science fiction. They read that book and they're like, I love this book. So that one. If you want to know what everybody's talking about, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, but it is very, very, very similar to what's happening right now. Parable of the Talents was published in 1993, but it starts in 2024. So all those fires last year, that was lining right up with the book. So if you want to read it, I say read it for Halloween because it's terrifying. It's a little scary, just a little scary. But I mean, I don't have a favorite, but if you like Aliens, Clay's Ark or Dawn, and if you want what I call a romance, I would say Wild Seed, her 1980 novel. It's a centuries long push and pull back and forth between two characters. One who is trying to breed a race of people by any means necessary, and one woman's attempt to get him to do something different. But I don't think there's any way, I don't think there's not a bad starting point. And then if a novel is too intimidating, right? Listen, I know a novel can be a lot sometimes. Her collection of short stories, Bloodchild, and other stories are, you get the whole gamut.
Cool, cool. So like reading a lot of biographies, autobiographies, things like that over the years, why does it seem like historically our major figures they get way more acclaim after their passing whenever they're actually alive? Like you said, she had trouble with finances sometimes and things like that. Like why is that pattern always happening in your opinion, being a historian?
Well, oh, you're gonna give me a title of historian now. Well, I think part of it is, I imagine, right, people hanging around James Baldwin and like, oh, that's my friend James Baldwin. This is just, oh, I read his book. It's this, that, and the third. But we don't canonize people until later. Like when we're creating a literary tradition or thinking about a literary tradition. So I have, you'd be like, oh, it's a great book. People are doing that, but it's not until somebody comes along and they're just like, hey, this is a great writer. So I think it's about support, who we canonize, and of course the work that they do, the output that they do. I mean, James Baldwin was a huge figure, Toni Morrison, all of these people. Um, but it's I think part of it is the emergence of Black studies as a field and a discipline, right? You're trying to sort of go back and recover, not that anything had been lost, but recover or uncover things that people don't know about, doing some of that archival work so people can know who was James Baldwin, who was Toni Morrison, who was Maya Angelou, who was J. California Cooper, who were all these people, and to sort of raise them up as part of the canon. And then, of course, I think for her, she was a Black woman writing science fiction, and that was an anomaly, so to speak. She didn't know at the time that she was writing. She didn't know any other Black science fiction writers. She eventually met Samuel Delany, but she was like, it's like a party of one here. It's just me. And so when people are always telling you, I think you mentioned it earlier, people are always telling you like, oh, why aren't you writing about what's happening right now? Why are you writing the science fiction stuff? It's not relevant. People are going to put you in a certain category. It's similar with romance. Now, romance has 10 out of 10. I love me some romance. And so I think that people, they denigrate what they don't think is valuable. And so science fiction and romance, Black historical romance, have often been pushed aside as not serious literature, or was chick lit or something like that. And so those are some of the reasons,
I
right?
just, I just really, really hate it to my heart when I see some of the elders not get treated a certain way. Then whenever they pass, folks added there, oh man, they get the t-shirts and they're gonna buy all the books and they go like, unfortunately today, Jesse Jackson passed today.
Mhm.
Books gonna fly off the shelf, Jesse Jackson books, and rightfully so, but it's like why a person can't get their flowers when they can enjoy having a school named after them, and like you said, all the things you listed about Butler at the back of the book, like
Oh yeah.
NASA and all this stuff. Like, do that whenever they can enjoy those things. That's what I'm always thinking about.
It's I mean, and it's look, I don't have the answers. And I think sometimes I also think that we think we have more time. I think there's always that more time. And like, oh, I'm eventually gonna read Jesse Jackson's book. But you think there's more time.
I can raise my hand. I bought this biography years ago. It's in my Kindle library, like 590 something pages, and I just always had it.
Hmm.
Like I'm gonna get to it. And then
Hmm.
today, this morning, I'm like, now I gotta read it.
Now I gotta read it. Like dang. So
I told
it's
my friends, I gotta read it. I gotta read
yeah. Like, so I think it's just the nature. We think we have more time than we do, and oh, I can get that book anytime. And then I think, of course, now with book bans and you don't know what's going to be in stock, you're trying to just grab everything you can see. And then, of course, price markups. When people pass on, price markups, they do. So let me get this book real quick before they make it more than what it is.
Yeah, we saw the same thing earlier last year. Now time go by fast. Whenever Asada Shakur passed, there's
Ooh,
a thing online with Asada Shakur. Like it was the firestorm trying to
yeah.
find her thing.
Yeah, that book is good. I taught her book in 2020, and my students loved it. Spring 2020, before the world shut down, they loved it. It's such a good book. Neo slave narrative, by the way.
Oh, there it is. Here we go. Here we go. So my last closing question before we get up out of here, man. You also teach and write about vampires. I love vampires personally. She bites back. But tell me, you're the expert. Your thoughts on the movie Sinners? Yeah, how you thought when you saw it? What were you thinking? How did you feel? Give us all the things.
Man, first of all, there was a presentation on campus, and they were running late, and I was like, I have a movie to get to. I was doing a 4 o'clock movie. It was on a Thursday because I like to be by myself in the movie theater. I don't like a whole lot of noise, and I was like,
Me
people are
too.
at school.
Me too.
Okay, good. See, we understand each other.
I am a bad day guy. I want the bad day.
Matinee. I was like, it's 4 o'clock on a Thursday. People will be at work at school. Ain't nobody gonna be there. It was me and two other people. And so I'm sitting here, Sammy walks up in the little jump scare. I was like, ooh, okay, yeah, because I like scary movies. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? You see smoke and stack. And I'm like, all right, you see the vampire. And I'm just like, oh, I'm just thinking, oh, it's shot so pretty. Delta Slim, when he's writing, talking about the lynching, I'm listening to the sound where you could hear the lynching happening in the background. So I'm just like, man, this is good. It's just good. But of course, I think like everybody, I was like, all right, well, I was like, somebody got to die. Like, when is it happening? But that dance scene, the juke joint scene, I about levitated out my seat. I said, oh my God, I have to watch this again. It was so good. Just everything, everything. Oh,
I'm going to admit something on my podcast. I'm going to admit something. I booked the Cardinal Sin. The movie was so good. Me and my friends have an ongoing group chat. I'm the whole time texting my friend because this show is called Sin with the Griots.
mm-hmm.
Podcast is called the Griot Podcast with the Griot themes. I'm like, bro, the Griots all throughout this whole movie. Just throughout the whole movie, everything we talk about, like, it is here. I'm just this whole time just lighting it up on the text.
It was so good. I think one of my friends saw it before I did. I was like, y'all got to see it. They were like, okay. I said, I'm not saying nothing to you. So we've got a separate group chat so we can talk about it. They get out the movie theater. We're on FaceTime, like screaming about it. A friend of mine, she's like, I don't like scary movies. Like, you can watch this. You can watch this. And so one of them watched, she's like, oh my God, you can. And so everybody just watching it. I taught it this past fall. We did a couple of screenings on campus. People
Yeah.
just wanted to talk about it, like our students. And we did just so good.
You mentioned the first Black Panther years ago. It's kind of like one of my only other times I remember, like after the movie, for months after, so many book lists being posted. Like if y'all like this, you got to go and read this, and then people
Yep.
making actual syllabus and curriculums are being posted. And I was just in bliss for months afterwards. Like, yeah,
Yeah. 'Cause I mean,
yeah.
I'm no film buff, but Ryan just does. I mean, he's a student of history, right? And he is very intentional about everything that he does. If I didn't know that before, which I did, but just listening to how he's talking about Mississippi, how for his grandmother, like all of the things, like all the things that went into this movie, the intentionality behind it, the color scheme, um, just just absolutely just blown away. Uh, blown away. Love
So
it.
between Ryan Coogler, of course, and Jordan Peele, what he's doing, been doing, Jordan Peele, what is the importance of us in those spaces when it comes to horror and just other forms of entertainment and writing? What's the importance of us being behind that lens and doing the writing, stuff like that?
Well, one thing is that we we get to see ourselves. The black guy doesn't die first. Like you get to see yourself in so many different roles, right? You as the hero, as the damsel in distress, as the monster, or sometimes not the monster, right? But sometimes we get to express a collective, whatever the collective horror happens to be. I just think it's really important that we get to tell stories. What's scary for us may not be scary for other people. We don't. Maybe we're not worried about monsters. We worried about the Klan, or maybe we are worried about monsters, right? The idea that Black horror doesn't be about police brutality or the Klan. It can also be. I watched him recently, which I really enjoy, but look. Don't want to give to, but like football as a god, football as a sort of monster. And I said, yes, like masculinity is the monster. Okay, I'm down with that. Or something like
Yeah.
Eve's Bayou, right? Where, you got a philandering daddy and a little girl, you just trying to, or yeah, like us so wild. And I said, Jordan, keep it up. And then Sinners, right? You've got the monster and you got the human monster and then you got the vampires. And it's really you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Um, yeah, yeah,
Okay, before you get out of here, man, you have deep dived into Octavia Butler a lot. What
yes.
can we expect from you next in your writing, your creativity? What can we expect next out of you, Dr. Parker?
I don't know. So I did write something on Sinners, so that's out for review. And so I don't that review process. It's an article. I'm going back to the archives sometime later this year for the Butler archives, looking at some more of her stuff. Want to look at how she writes about her body, one of the things, she was hard on herself in terms of her writing and all these things, but also in terms of how she looked. And so she calls herself ugly a lot. And I'm really interested in uh, pulling out some of that and how she sort of writes about that. I don't have another book project at the moment. I'm still sort of like riding high off of all of this. I am working with Jerry Canavan and Susanna Morris on a project on Butler, and hopefully we'll be able to announce what that is soon. But yeah, so and get people to submit stuff. Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much for being an amazing guest. I enjoyed myself as a host. And anybody watching this later on, man, definitely get the book. 5-star review out of me. It's an amazing book.
Thank you.
Really, really understanding Octavia Butler and her mind, her creativity. Highly advised it. Go out there and get it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. See you all later next week on the Sean P. Experience.